Warm welcome from Angasse 6 in Vienna, Alsergrund. We have our lunch debate today on the presidential elections in Romania. I have a wonderful and distinguished guest, and I'm very happy that we have this opportunity to talk with each other. Next to me is Mihai Razvan Ungureanu, the former Prime Minister, former Foreign Minister, and also former Director of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Romania, the professor at the University of Bucharest, Director of the Romanian Center for Russian Studies, and also a project leader here at IDM. Mihai, thank you very much for joining us today for this very timely debate. And I'm very happy that we have a more pro-European and positive outlook that we will discuss today. Thank you for joining. Two housekeeping rules. First of all, there might be the testing of a fire siren in this building. They tried to not do it when we do this, but I can't guarantee that it's not happening. So if it happens, don't get up immediately. We check if there really is a fire or if it's not the testing. Don't worry, that's all part of the plan. The second thing is I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask. We have a couple of people here in the room that then can also ask questions, but there is of course also the possibility to ask questions in our online webinar, where I see that we have quite many people joining us also there. Just ask the question in the chat, and my colleague Sophia Beiter, who is taking care of the live stream, will inform me about questions there. But now, without further ado, quick recap. This was basically the third round of elections, because after the first initial round of presidential elections last November, they were cancelled due to a multitude of strange interferences in this presidential elections, and ultimately the Constitutional Court cancelled the election. Also, the leading candidate from that initial first round, who was leading in the polls also throughout the turn of the year, Georgescu, was banned from participating in this election. And now we had the situation that after the first round of elections, that the far-right candidate Simion was leading with 40% or by 2 million votes. Nevertheless, the independent candidate and now former mayor of Bucharest, Nicușor Dan, won this election, and we see that Romania is going to stay on a pro-European and pro-NATO path, which is, of course, good news for us. But maybe you can give us a breakdown if everything is going to be okay now in Romania. Mihai.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for inviting me today to the Institute. And thank you for making the promise fulfilled in a way, because we thought about this webinar quite a long time ago. Yes, what happened yesterday, not just yesterday, but in the last 3 days, because presidential elections in Romania last 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, mostly devoted to the diaspora, which is the largest diaspora in the European Union. And Sunday, yesterday, there was the case of the Romanian citizens living in Romania, their opportunity to vote. It was a long day, let me put it this way, which ended with the victory of Mr. Dan, the now former mayor of Bucharest, with roughly 54%, precisely 53.6% of the votes that were casted from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening, against George Simion, who got 46.4% of the votes. The turnover in terms of participants was incredibly high. In the last 30 years, I think it was only the case in 2014 that turnover was a little bit larger. That was the time when, in the second round of presidential elections, Mr. Ponta fought against Mr. Iohannis, with the result that Mr. Iohannis became president of Romania in the end. So there were almost 11.6 million voters, Romania plus the voters in diaspora. Out of roughly 18 million citizens who have the right to vote. When you make the extraction, 11.6 out of 18, and then you can then realize that there is a silent majority of voters who have not expressed any wish to support any of the two candidates. Yeah, and this silent majority is about 6.5, roughly 6.5 million people, which is quite large. But nevertheless, the turnover was really consistent, and I could see with my own eyes how streets were filled with people queuing to cast their ballots in time, so that their vote would become efficient. The two candidates are, let's say, completely different from each other. They do not represent the same slice of the Romanian domestic politics. On the contrary, they're very much and fairly opposite to each other. On one hand, the candidate of the far right electorate, Mr. Simion, who is 38 years of age, so he's pretty young, but still energetic. He succeeded to amass the votes that were casted for himself in the first round of the presidential elections in some 2 weeks ago, plus the votes of the former candidate to the presidential elections in that round in November, which was casted out by the Constitution. In the first round, so 2 weeks ago, Mr. Simion got 41%. Quite a lot. Whereas Mr. Dan, who was then mayor of Bucharest, as said, got something like 28. So almost half of what Mr. Simion got 2 weeks ago. This fantastic propulsion Mr. Dan got was very much due to the fact that a large number of voters showed up yesterday, mobilized by the very fact that the far right was vividly and expressively anti-European, in the background pro-Russian. Mr. Simion's personal style was a bit strange, I would say. Maybe this is not the best word. I would put it into inverted commas, but in any case, was awkward. Very aggressive, very much trying to impose himself and his own image, boosting his own image in the eyes of the electorate, invoking, just like Georgescu, on the other hand, invoking God every couple of words, and providing no real solutions to the upcoming economic crisis Romania lures itself in. Whereas Mr. Dan, just on the contrary, was very calm. His composition was very academic. Never, when criticizing any candidate, he used just polite words and never raised his voice anyway. Whereas Mr. Simion was far more muscular than this. This very difference in terms of appearance also meant a lot for the voters. Because the elections, presidential elections in Romania, are emotional in most cases, and people would seek for someone who's at the same time pleasant in general terms and ready to provide paths into the good direction, towards the targets the vast population of Romania hopes for. This is in a nutshell.
Yeah. Wonderful, thank you. You mentioned the diaspora, and I found it very interesting if we look at the numbers, and I picked out the overall numbers, which means that in total, President-elect Dan collected around 830,000 more votes in the second round, but in the diaspora, Simion actually won by 200,000 votes. And there's also a split in the diaspora. If we look at, for instance, the Republic of Moldova, where around 80% have voted for Dan, but then a majority, for instance, in Austria, voted for Simion. Can you explain this a little bit more, what the diaspora vote, the split means, and also why there's such a vote for an anti-EU candidate? Because in the first impression, it doesn't make sense. If you're in the diaspora, especially in an EU diaspora like Austria, why would you vote for a radical far-right candidate that is trying to even maybe get your country out of the European Union, which would harm your diaspora status in the country you're living in?
Yeah, I'll try to have an answer to this with a footnote to your question. The Republic of Moldova does not belong to the Romanian diaspora. It's a country in itself. So the Moldovan population is not accountable for the diaspora.
Yeah.
It's about the Romanian citizens who are abroad. Yeah. The Republic of Moldova voted in a large majority for Mr. Dan, simply because that was very much the sense, in not just in Chișinău, but in the whole country, that when Romania keeps pacing towards prosperity and social security, and this is what comes as economic prosperity on behalf of Romania's membership in the European Union, that would help also the Republic of Moldova to pursue its own scopes related to Brussels and to the European Union in general. Besides, there is quite a large number of Moldovan citizens who do have Romanian citizenship. So this is actually the that layer of the Moldovan society that showed up the voting points. Then what happens next in Moldova is also important, because presidential elections will soon happen there, and without a solid majority, all efforts of President Maia Sandu would be doomed to nothing. Whereas the sense of having a firm support from Bucharest was very important in casting votes on behalf of Mr. Dan.
Yeah.
As for the rest of the Romanians living abroad, there were countries where the diaspora is concentrated, mostly in the western part of our continent. So it's Italy, it's about Italy, Spain, UK, Germany, Austria, but Romanians can be found anywhere in the world. I was joking with my friends yesterday. There are some roughly 300 Romanian citizens in New Zealand. And the votes on behalf of Mr. Dan outnumber 89% of these 300. When it comes to Italy or Spain or France or UK, there were hundreds, well, they went over the threshold of 100,000 votes. Now, one should imagine that the diaspora communities are not different from what the Romanian society back home looks like. It's like a source, it's like an image, a diminished image of the Romanian society at home. And the Romanian society at home meant 41% on behalf of George Simion in the first round. So this is what happened in the diaspora. And this is why Simion, who traveled a lot and meeting various molecules of Romanians living abroad, community molecules of Romanians living abroad, was pretty welcome there, and therefore benefited of the votes. Then there is also a sense in parts of the Romanian diaspora that the state itself, Romania itself, could not keep up with their expectations. And that was the reason why they left Romania to work abroad, different jobs. And we're not talking about those who are medical doctors or academics or else. And this, the fact that they live there engenders a sort of a frustration. We would not like to work here, but if going back home, we will not enjoy the advantages we have in other countries of the European Union. On one hand. On the other hand, let's not forget that most of Mr. Simion's voters were not people of higher education, but of lower education. Nevertheless, their needs and expectations would very much weight the way other people with better education might have. So that was the feeling from the very beginning. Frustration meant also disappointment with the political establishment back home, with the traditional parties, with corruption episodes, and so on and so forth. That went up to bringing votes to Simion in the sense that Simion would represent something else, something diametrically different from what might have been the characters back home in Romania on the political stage. Let's not cast votes for the same people. Let's embrace someone who's new. And maybe something else would happen in the end.
Right.
A third reason is the very political discourse of Mr. Simion, appealing to emotions, to basic emotions, and trying to instill a sense of hope, but imbued with mysticism and false promises. False promises that in the end, in the past couple of weeks, became very blatant. Mr. Simion, psychologically speculating his behavior, put himself into the shoes of a president, even though he was a candidate only, and tried to be very, very assertive this way. And he described himself, believe it or not, in some circumstances, even before journalists, to have been in a situation of using lies to attract people to himself. That was somehow unusual, to put it mildly.
Right.
And people realized this. And then again, coming back to the direct impression of his behavior, I say it, I think, a third time, he was very aggressive. When I say that he was assertive in his speech, it's only about his speech, but he was aggressive in terms of general behavior. And that would not appeal to people to support him entirely in the end. So that was the split. Why Nicușor Dan didn't get too many, didn't win the diaspora by and large. There's a mayor of Bucharest. It is still a marvel that he succeeded to become well known in Romania. I mean, he could have been well known in Bucharest himself, although he was not that kind of mayor who would travel around different districts of the town only to be seen by the locals. He kept himself quite aloof from people, but again, he was well known in Romania. He wasn't that kind of politician who, just like Simion, for example, would propel himself into the diaspora whenever the possibility would arise. He never visited the Romanians in the Romanian diaspora or communities in the UK or in France, in Germany. He never visited the mayor of Vienna. So that was also a perception that he belongs more to Romanians living home than to Romanians living abroad. So when combining all these factors, one would realize that the score Mr. Simion got in the diaspora is very much the result of normalcy. It's nothing specifically Romanian or different from whatever other electoral process elsewhere.
Very quick follow-up. Would that also have helped Dan, because he's not part of that traditional elite? Would that also, ultimately, even though he was maybe not that known, but was not perceived of the system, that he was a real alternative to the ones who wanted something else, but did not want Simion?
Certainly, yes, because he always called himself an independent. And this is how its own campaign team coined him as candidate, presidential candidate in both tours. So as a candidate, as an independent, he was upfront, believed not to be connected or bothered by the local political parties or regime. Then he also tried to keep, and he succeeded to, a kind of a sanitary distance between himself and prominent political figures in Romania, without being unpolite or brutal, but refusing, even up to the point when he started refusing political help. In his mild words and with a very positive discourse. But he delineated a sort of a space, symbolic space between himself as politician, as future president of Romania, and what has been left in tatters, frankly speaking, after the elections, the road of elections we have had last year. So it played quite an important role.
Let's talk about the foreign interference. We know that part of the cancellation of the first round, although not in the legal sense, but nevertheless, it was clear that, especially on social media and here TikTok, the reach of Georgescu was amplified, and that this was most likely coming with the support from the Russian Federation. We have also seen that there is some sort of interference from the US, as prominent figures in the Trump administration have been pushing for voting for Simion ultimately, because they said that the ban of Georgescu not being allowed to run is politically motivated. So we have seen that there is a lot of foreign interference from different ways. but still this was not successful. Does that mean that the Kremlin is not able to actually interfere as much as we think, and it's not so dangerous, and is also MAGA as a movement not so appealing in Romania, that this could have an influence on the region? Or do you see that danger still looming, but it was just one victory in a battle that is still ongoing?
When addressing this topic, Russian interference in Romania, we actually finger point that Russian intervention or interference with various political actors and mechanisms.
Also, Russian interference, probably. No. If you didn't join from the very beginning, this is a test alarm. We are all safe, most likely, and we'll continue the discussion.
The Russian interference happens, Russian interference, if we use this word, is very much a part of the Russian general interest to make democracies in Europe malfunction. And if possible, to take them through crisis of management and functionality. But things are not as blatant as one could imagine. Should not understand the Russian resonance as like in Cold War cartoons with a bear poking his claws into what is the European Union now. It's far more delicate. And yes, there are institutions in Russia, maybe or likely connected to the Kremlin, that would that know how to use various social media platforms to contribute to the very boost of political images of candidates who have shown themselves to be closer to Russia or interested to connect themselves better with Moscow. On the other hand, Georgescu himself, last year, November 2024, leaving whatever interference might have been on social media, was very much using illegal methods to propose himself as presidential candidate. And these illegal methods, once unearthed by the general prosecutor, by different other offices, brought him to justice. And he's now, he has a lot of criminal suspicions hanging above himself, and he will be in a position to appear before the judges pretty soon. And that was the reason why he could not attend this redo of the presidential election. On the other hand, we should fear that this interference using social media platforms could happen either in Poland yesterday or in the couple of weeks to come, or elsewhere in France. The more that some of the national intelligence agencies of important EU countries signal out that this happens on a usual basis. When it comes to the interference of the United States, most interesting political figures there, I wouldn't say that a word of help howling over the Atlantic on behalf of the far-right candidate would have meant anything to the Romanian election. And to put it into brackets, even the Romanian electorate is very much anti-Russian in terms of political attitude. It is very pro-American, but help coming, I mean, verbally coming from Washington wouldn't mean as much as, for example, Elon Musk's obvious support for the Alternative für Deutschland. It didn't happen the same thing in Romania. So it wasn't Elon Musk coming up saying, okay, let's bring Simion to the pole position. Never. But just like in Deutschland, just like in Germany, sorry, people understood the challenge. And what happened in Germany was a miracle, that the AfD didn't reach the top of the political ladder, just like in Austria with the FPÖ. The same happened in Romania. Simion came the second.
Thank you. I already saw that there's a question also online. I will open up the floor also for the people in the room here. So we have a question by Robert Schwarz, who says, how is the outcome of the Romanian presidential election likely to reshape the balance of power between the president and the prime minister, especially considering recent political tensions and party alignments? And the second question is, how might the outcome of the Romanian presidential elections impact the country's role within NATO and the EU, especially amid the ongoing regional tensions with Russia and instability in Eastern Europe?
Yeah, my duty to thank to Robert, who's a very dear friend of mine, for his questions. He's a well-known journalist, actually. Well, it depends very much on what the elected president will do when he will be fully instated in his presidential position a couple of days from now on. Why? Because he needs to work out a way to deal with the so-called democratic majority in the Romanian parliament, which is composed of the Social Democrats. They won the election, the parliamentary elections, the National Liberals, the former party, well, the party the former mayor of Bucharest, Mr. Dan, belonged to. This is the Save Romania Union, the Democratic Hungarian Union, and the minority groups. And again, to put it into brackets, there were not only the Romanian citizens voting in a large majority for Mr. Dan, but also the Romanian citizens of Hungarian identity who voted for Mr. Dan in a very large number, because Mr. Simion, apart other things he's represented by, is also very xenophobic and anti-Semitic as well. So it depends very much on what he will do and how will he find channels of communication with the parties. How would he find a way to put them together around the table and form a new government? A new government that will be on one hand ready to take upon itself a very heavy, unpopular load of decisions and heavy decisions addressing the economic situation of Romania. And on the other hand, will be able to steer the country through domestic and foreign dangers. And this is not easy. In a way, it would, what happened in 2024 and in the first half of this year, put the traditional parties, that is the Social Democrats and the National Liberals, put them in difficult situations. It showed that the gallery of former political figures would not work anymore, that they have to reshape themselves, reshuffle themselves, as to gain more credibility in the eyes of the electorate. And this cannot happen overnight. For example, even Mr. Dan addressed this topic when answering to questions similar to what Robert Schwarz asked us. When will you begin the consultations with the parties, so that they will have a majority in the parliament and a government that would be representative for that majority and will work with you? And he said, I will do it as soon as possible. I paraphrase it.
Yeah.
I will do it as soon as possible, but we need to see what happens now, or what would be the outcome of what happens now in the Social Democratic Party, because they have tensions inside between different members of the let's say political management group. They may undergo a series of internal crises, and we cannot yet imagine what will happen with the party itself. Mm-hmm. And again, as a footnote, the Social Democrats in the second round of the polls, so in the last 3 days, voted majoritarily for Mr. Simion. Mm-hmm. So they went closer to the far right, which in a way contradicts the very name of the party. Social Democrats combining themselves and vying for political power with the far right party, Simion's far right party. This is strange. It's very much something like what happened in the last couple of years of the Weimar Republic. Mm-hmm. A sort of a mingling of contradictions, and the impossible becoming very possible, non-ideologically speaking. So he said, I will wait to see what would happen with the Social Democrats. But in the meantime, he will certainly waive his connections, his path toward the other parties who supported him, fully supported him. The Liberals, the Hungarian Union, and the Save Romania Union as well. If there is a chance to put a new government up in a short time span, which I hope, with a prime minister that would be at the same time credible and ready to work. Mr. Dan mentioned the interim president of Romania and interim chairman of the National Liberals, Mr. Bolojan, as his choice, his likely choice for prime ministership. If this happens, and the government would then have a credible definition, popularly speaking, then it would be in a way easier. But all analysts are prone to consider the upcoming government to be a government of sacrificial duty because of the load, as I said, of heavy decisions this government should take.
So not that different from the Austrian situation, maybe.
With the difference that Mr. Bolojan has much more of a profile than the Austrian Chancellor, if I may say so, with a smile. But they're both, if compared, they're both experienced in terms of terms of politics in general, and they are modest and interested to work. This is what is actually important. In terms of foreign policy, Mr. Dan is a staunch European, and if NATO needs to be defended, he would well act as a defender of NATO himself. So his Western orientation cannot be put under suspicion in any case. We'll see what would be the next decision of his once instated as president. Which places will he visit abroad? We still don't know. Their choices. For example, Mr. Simion, when asked about what will he visit first, he was one time, if I recall it well, he said, I will go to Washington, but actually he cannot go to Washington without any invitation. And then he said, I will try to see Mrs. Meloni. But that might be easier. That might be easier. Mr. Dan never went into such speculations in this moment. So he will be, I would say, a beacon of Europeanism and interested to keep the transatlantic relation between Romania and the American strategic partner, between the EU and the US as high as possible and as consistent as possible at the same time. He's also, as I said, he's a good omen for the situation in the Republic of Moldova. He will never consider Ukraine to be an aggressor, as Mr. Simion was prone to say. He was never casting out to the Republic of Moldova or from Ukraine, as was the case of Mr. Simion. He believes the Russian Federation was an aggressor in comparison with Mr. Simion again, and so on and so forth. So he's not a character of surprises from this point of view, and he will know what people should be brought around himself as future consultants or presidential counselors. This is something that we will watch readily in the next day.
Is there a traditional first country visit that Romanian presidents would do? Did Johannes travel to which country first? Do you remember?
The Republic of Moldova.
Moldova, huh?
The Republic of Moldova. But there are some destinations which are not, let's say, which are not surprising. It's either Chisinau in Moldova or Brussels. So the choice lies somewhere in between.
Maybe you can do a match and go to both at the same day.
It depends very much on how energetic a president is. But there are spots where a president could go without invitation, and there are the summits, EU summits, NATO summits else, and places where a president could not attend or visit without an invitation. This is why I always smile when the presidential candidates in the first round were ready to say, I will go to Washington. It's ready. I'm ready to be there.
All right, we have 2 questions, 3 even. So let's keep it short and simple, but also introduce yourself. I know you, but maybe not everybody else.
Jörg Rauchenberg, I'm on the board of IDM, and I have been previously in charge of all of Southeastern Europe as a commercial counselor, including Romania, therefore, and I had the pleasure to be there frequently. Now, I wonder about this decision of Simion to say that as a prime minister he would choose Georgescu. As a president he would choose Georgescu as prime minister, because I wonder if that was an advantage or rather a disadvantage, but because traditionally Romanians, as I have also put out rightly, are suspicious of too much pro-Russian candidates, and even during Ceausescu's period, he always tried to keep distance to Soviet Union at the time. And it's strange now, Ukraine is blamed for some territories, or also Moldova, which was the actually decisions of Stalin. It had nothing to do with today's Ukraine. And isn't there a difference, like in Hungary, even years ago, for instance, Alexander Dugin, he already said, once Russia will control Europe, then the Treaty of Trianon would be revised. And a lot of Hungarians are in the belief that maybe they would get pieces of land, but which land? Actually from Romania and Slovakia. So I just wonder about this situation in the population that believes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question, and I'm very happy to see you here again with old friends. This is why questions are mellowed. I'm trying to build an answer that would be at the same time clear and shed a light over the topic you touched on. Let's go to the technicalities first. Simion is likely to have used Georgescu's image with the intention to capture Georgescu's former electorate from November. This doesn't always function in a mechanical way because people would vote whatever they want to. I mean, they could lie to you if asked to cast the vote on behalf of a friend. Yeah, they could lie to you, and when alone in the booth, he would stamp whoever he wants to. So it's not always, it doesn't always work mechanically. But Simion wanted to have Georgescu next to him, promising him anything, including the position of the potential future position of prime minister, without explaining how this could happen, because it would mean that the majority in the parliament would then vote on behalf of, would then change and vote on behalf of a new government that could be led by Mr. Georgescu, which is pretty unlikely, because as I said, 60% of the parliament is composed of parties which are pro-democratic, pro-European, pro-NATO. Second, because it is quite unlikely for a freshly built majority in the parliament to accept new, anticipated in this case, elections. It doesn't happen like this. It's not a skin rush. It doesn't go like today you have it and tomorrow it's gone.
Depends on the Russians.
Yeah. So that was Mr. Simion's intention. What was interesting is that Georgescu accepted this kind of dance, and he showed himself next to Simion, indulging himself into thinking of how big he will in the end be, which speaks volumes about his lunacy, and I'm not afraid to use this word. But I won't go into characterizing or depicting Mr. Georgescu, because he lives in Austria as well.
So we have.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing would be this general situation of the history of Romania, and how come that so many are inclined to vote for someone who is actually turning to Russia and away from
it was interesting, but again, his discourse, Georgescu's discourse in that round of presidential election in November 24 was less interesting for Romanians from the point of view of how important Putin is and how much Georgescu loves Russia, blah, blah, blah. It was something else that reached the strings, the emotional strings of the electorate. He was always inducing through his discourse a mystical, pseudo-mystical narrative. Again, he was stumbling over God and heaven and miracles that should be performed, the exceptionality of the Romanian nation, every couple of phrases. And his discourse was something between someone who speaks about the Bible without reading the Bible and the very gesticulation of a pastoral character. That was interesting. And as I said, elections, mostly when they are addressing the presidential position, are very emotional. What we realized, nevertheless, was that the Romanian society is not as coherent as we could have imagined it. Yeah? So there are people, a third of the electorate, if I may say, would be ready to gulp such narratives without somehow losing, in a way, against the background of losing the critical judgment. And when informing themselves from one single source of information, this is what happens in the end. I'm not blaming them, but this is a psychological, a social psychological issue that should be addressed. And what of the expectations we now have to the newly elected president is that he will be ready when bringing up a new government to properly address a very sensitive, very sensitive and structural matter that is important to the Romanian population in general, and that is education. That is education.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. But we have a few more questions and only 10 minutes left. So, Gunther, quick introduction and quick question.
My name is Günther Bellinger. I'm activist on X. Congratulations for Romania. I have also supported the President Dan. I'm very happy about it. My question is like this: can we address the issues which are really there and which are in a way still resulting that the Romanians in the EU feel discriminated, and Romania is still, after now, I think 18 years or 17 years in the EU, is still not full member of the Eurozone and has not adopted the Euro. And this would, I think, evaluate a little bit or reduce the feeling of discrimination of the Romanian people in the European Union. By joining the Euro, they would be full members of our whole institutions. And the recognition of Kosovo should also come, please.
Quick answer. As one of the signatories of the EU treaty with Romania, I can tell you that there are 20 years that passed between that very moment and today. Today, actually, well, in May, we celebrate 20 years in the time Romania became a member, full-fledged member of the European Union. Anyway, it's not about discrimination per se in the European Union, although the bitter feeling that was left with the Schengen affair caught a lot of my Romanian fellows in a state of despair, if I may say. That was a feeling of upper frustration. How could one of the most important friends and economic partners and political partners of Romania, namely Austria, behave this way? The more that the government at the time, the Chancellor, Mr. Nehammer, and the actual Minister of the Interior could not provide reliable explanations. I mean, that was just political blah blah, could not be believed by anybody. Fine, that's over. It's not about discrimination in the sense that Romanians living in UK, for example, which is not an EU country, unfortunately, anymore, but in France or Spain would feel discriminated. There were cases here and there in Germany, for example, where Romanian workers might have been kept in illegal, might have been caught in illegal contracts with God knows what entrepreneur at the time. But this, again, does not address discrimination. They feel discriminated against what the Romanian state could do for themselves living abroad and for their families that have been left home. And there are issues which are pretty important. For example, how would the Romanian state, the Romanian executive, the Romanian agencies, executive agencies, what kind of plans would they have to provide a proper education to children that have been left behind by their parents working? And that is a very sensitive problem. Would those children, which have been left maybe being left behind to the very kindness of grandparents, if any, would they be given a proper path towards self-determination and to a proper adult life? That is quite a sensitive issue. And so I would, if asked about discrimination, I would not immediately look into what happened to the diaspora, but what happens between the diaspora and the country they left. That is where discrimination happens, mostly. Did I answer your question?
And I mean, the discrimination not having the euro is not something that is prevented by EU members.
No,
I mean,
I
there's
would
a
say
clear procedure
the euro,
how to adopt
the euro decision is very much a
Speed up a little bit and unite Europe a bit faster.
yeah, absolutely.
But this is also part of a Romanian effort. There are clear criteria that you need to fulfill.
Yeah, exactly.
There need to be 2 years in the exchange rate mechanism too. I mean, Bulgaria is maybe getting a sign.
Not even in the Bulgarian case, there are problems because, as you have perhaps witnessed, the president who is leaning towards Moscow, we all know, he is doing whatever he has in his powers to forestall this process of adopting the European currency in Bulgaria. But this is a political decision. When it comes to Romania, it's very much a strategic economic decision. Some of the criteria of in adopting needed when adopting the euro have been already met. But on the other hand, we have to gauge this against an economic, I would say, a looming financial crisis that comes to Romania. And this is not because of Romania using its own currency, the leu. It's very much because the expenditures of previous governments were too high and too deep. That was the problem.
We have another friend asking a question online. And this is Ulrich Schneckener, a common friend of ours. Mihai, greetings from Berlin and congratulations on the new president. His questions are, how do you assess the impressive vote of Hungarian population in Romania who, despite Orban's support for Simion, voted in masses for Dan? Second one, following up the debate about the diaspora vote, it seems to be largely a problem of Western Europe, in particular Germany, Austria, and Italy, where 2/3 voted for Simion. How should and could this situation be addressed by the new president?
Thank you, Ulrich, and I'm happy for understanding that you were with us here.
He's in the virtual space with us.
Yes. Virtual space. The first question was an interesting phenomenon. So, what Mr. Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, said about Simion was, in a way of greeting him into the larger family of right conservatives. It wasn't exactly an encouragement in this sense. Okay, let's have him with us, and maybe in time he will dress up conveniently, politically speaking, and he will behave accordingly. The first reaction came from the chairman of the Hungarian Democratic Union in Romania, Mr. Kelemen Hunor, who
It's Viktor Orban.
The first reaction to Mr. Orban's words came from Mr. Kelemen Hunor, so the chairman of the Hungarian Democratic Union, who plainly contradicted Mr. Orban's words, or intentions, better say, telling publicly, delivering to the public the fact, which was well known, that Mr. Simion is a xenophobic political character. And he blamed the Hungarian community and Hungary in general for whatever might have happened in Romania. If there would have been Jews, he would have also addressed the Jews the same way. Well, he did, but in a different way. There was a couple of days before, yes, it was on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, last Friday, Mr. Simion appeared hand in hand with Mr. Georgescu in a broadcast, and Mr. Georgescu plainly quoted one of the books, phrase from one of the books of the former head of the Romanian Iron Guard, which was the extreme far-right movement in the interwar period. And he did it in such a way that you could see that was almost a dictum. And Simion agreed to that very quotation, without saying anything, but nodding. That was unbelievable. That was unbelievable. So the reaction of Kelemen Hunor was absolutely healthy, because he has the responsibility behind him in representing the Romanian citizens of Hungarian origin. And he basically stood up against Orban, just for the simple fact that he wanted to do this. And what was, again, very interesting, the Hungarians, well, the ethnic Hungarians in Romania, they went after what Kelemen Hunor said, which strikes the difference between what is Hungary under Mr. Orban and what happens with the Romanian citizens of Hungarian origin and their political representation. Just very interesting. This is why they were champions in voting Mr. Dan, who was by far more palatable than Mr. Simion. When it comes to
the diaspora, what the new president can do.
Well, it needs to be engaged. It needs to be engaged. It needs to be spoken to. It needs to be understood in all its expectations. May they be real or virtual. And it should always, since a president of Romania is not just a president of Romania per se, it's a president of all Romanians, because there's Romanian citizens. So they should address their needs no matter where they live. It means that we need to have a president or representatives of the president or representatives of the government that would carry on dialoguing with Romanian communities abroad in a consistent sense, not just delivering hot air to them, because they don't need hot air. They need a life that would keep them connected to Romania and to their families back home. So this is the engagement is important. The engagement is very, very important. In a way, what the diaspora hopes, I would suppose, is a pilgrim, a political pilgrim. It's a president which is a political pilgrim and represents the nation as such, carries the flag of the nation. Maybe in Austria, in Germany, elsewhere, even in New Zealand, about the 300.
We are already over the time, but I will forego my last question for Malvina. Quick.
Thank you very much. Malvina, colleague research associate here at the IDM. I have two questions regarding the voters. So I've seen very many parallels between Polish and Romanian elections, also some differences. But I'm interested, do you think that Dan won because he had such a convincing narrative, because he presented himself as independent and was independent? Or was it rather that the society was so mobilized against Simion? And the second question is also about what's going to happen with the electorate of Simion, because it's a big chunk of the society. They won't go anywhere. Do you think that they will disengage from politics? Do you think that they may radicalize more? Or is there anything that Dan can do in order to be the president, as we said, of all Romanians and not just of the half that elected him?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Martina. There is something different here. So Dan and Simion were inhabiting two different planets. It's difficult to compare them. We need some criteria for this. So if one of the criterion is behavior, personal behavior towards the electorate, then, as I said, Simion was very aggressive. And in the past couple of weeks, and not only the past couple of weeks, in the past months, I would say, he lost his reins. He lost his reins. He started becoming starting becoming, you know, like in a La Fontaine fable, he started gonflating himself to the point of bursting. And this is what happened to him. He has a very good image. Well, actually, he has a very good impression about himself. A very good impression about himself. He doesn't support criticisms. And when criticized, he becomes aggressive. Sorry? Physically aggressive, absolutely. And for example, he despised the Romanian media. And when he despises in present, not in past. And why? And what happens when he does this? He has never taken any questions from the floor, from the Romanian media per se. He was at the point of shoving them out of the room. Whereas, on the other hand, he would take questions from the foreign media. He played a lot on this kind of foreign argument, trying to have people perceiving him as aptly working in the foreign relations field. That is not the case. It's not the case. So that was the character. Whereas Dan, Mr. Dan, sorry, is something else. Behaviorally speaking, he's just the opposite of what a hyper-energetic political character could look like. In terms of political ideological presence, Simion was very much far right, with everything that could define the far right extremism in nowadays Europe. He was even, I would say that he was less eatable when compared to Mrs. Meloni, which is something absolutely fantastic. But when compared with Mrs. Le Pen, I would happily meet Mrs. Le Pen instead of meeting Mr. Simion. That is the paradox. That is the paradox. And he himself, he did a lot of things which prompted his political image is coming from the murky territories of illegal business. He allied himself with all sorts of criminal families. He asked them for support during the elections. Incidents of the kind have happened yesterday, even in the diaspora, when people who have criminal records try to prevent voters to join the ballot station. Can imagine that. So it's delicate, I would say, from a legal point of view. Whereas Mr. Dan has no corruption suspicions upon himself. He's very polite. He takes things with a sort of a smile, and he keeps himself well educated. And he is well educated, let's be frank. I mean, he's a champion in mathematics. Something we would all like our children be. But Mr. Simion, again, living on his own planet, where thugs and muscles and maybe no brains would have been the bad omen if he could win the elections. But for the electorate, I doubt Mr. Simion himself has such a large electorate as shown by the figures, by the final figures. It's very much an electoral. This 41% of the electorate, let's say, that he got in the first round, was very much his own personal electorate, yeah, that would go with him. There was the electorate, some parts of the Georgescu's electorate, because he basically occupied the entire far-right spectrum. And actually, he got also some electorate from the Social Democrats. And in the second round, yesterday, we shouldn't be surprised when realizing, not today, but in a couple of weeks from now, I think, that almost 2/3 of the Social Democrats voted for Simion. So, and they're conjunctural. They're not Simion's electorate per se. They just conjunctural. So what would happen with Simion's electorate? Let's see. It's interesting to see what will happen with his party's electorate. Because chairmans would come and go. The party's existence should be questioned in this case. Did I answer the question? But I won't go into comparing the situation of Romania with the situation, with the electoral situation in Poland. Not yet.
I wouldn't
All right. Well, we are way over time, but I think it was very valuable that we had this discussion. And thank you very much for your willingness to give us this very early evaluation of the presidential election. I think interesting takeaways for me is, on the one hand side, that what you mentioned is Simion is quite young, so he has other opportunities. We might have won the battle for democracy, but the fight is a continuous one. And the other thing that I also take away is that what you pointed out and what we here at IDM are also trying to say when we look at elections in other countries of our region, is that what comes out of this foreign interference is not necessarily an immediate influence of one election. It's the undermining of trust in institutions and democracy that is the dangerous thing, and that we need to understand that this is an ongoing process, and therefore we need to stay vigilant each and every election. And I'm very happy that this turned out to be in this way.
May I interrupt you for one second,
please,
if you don't mind,
please.
Sebastian? What the traditional political parties and traditional political characters in Romania seem not to have understood was the fact that democracy itself is an ongoing project. It is like something that has to be nurtured every moment, every day, insisted on it, and built in any circumstance possible, talked about in any circumstance possible, criticize if necessary, but always on the positive side. If this doesn't happen, democracy starves and disappears in the end. And then things like this, with the upcoming of the far right, will happen.
Absolutely. And it's a very valuable point, and I'm afraid that's not a Romanian problem. That's a European and global problem. So we need to continue raise awareness on this. So thank you very much again for the time. It's an honor and always a pleasure to talk to you. In this mission to continue this awareness, we will do a very brief evaluation of the Polish presidential elections in 2 weeks, where we will feature Malwina Talek, who will join us virtually from vacation. We look forward to this. Our next event is already tomorrow. We have our General Assembly, and we have a very interesting discussion in St. Pölten in German on what would happen if Austria wouldn't have joined the European Union 30 years ago. In order to be able to implement this, I not only need the support of fantastic guests like Mihai, but also the support of my fantastic team here, especially for this event, Sophia Balter, who has taken care of this. Thank you for joining us here in the room. It's quite interesting to see that it works during lunchtime. Wonderful. Thank you. If you like what we do, and if you want to support us, become a member of IDM now, or buy us a coffee via the QR code that is hanging out in our seminar room. The same goes, of course, for our audience that joined us virtually. Thank you for doing so. Thank you for the interest. But we all know the times and the fight for democracy is resource intensive, and the cake shrinks. So if you want to support us consider a one-time donation or become even a member, and then you can even vote about the board, what is happening tomorrow as well. At the very least, please like, follow, subscribe to our newsletter and spread the word that we are out there. Thank you very much for your interest. Thank you very much again for the very valuable discussion, and I'm looking forward to continue this with you, but also with other partners from the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you.